On previous real-side experiences I have shared, I have been shown various stages of the end of this simulator creational realm, and the details of which would generally apply to any simulator breathing its last breath, so to say, as the mechanics are basically the same with all. For the overall consciousness is the simulator affected. The design and nature of the consciousness construct dictates the overall state the simulator then happens to be in. As the essence of the ears is that of a continuous self-recognition, this essence, this drive, has given rise to the most effective means by which this can be achieved. That aspects of the ears, real awareness units, lacking recognition of the ears they are a part of, become as though isolated within unreal simulated mechanics that provide a comparison by which to recognize the ears from. The ears is an everything reality, and to utilize a comparative method to recognize it, then something other than this everything is required by which awareness can operate within, and what can be other than everything must be something isolated from the everything whole, and affording then the ability to operate in such a way that the two can be compared, the everything isness and the something, the isolated part or piece of this everything. This then is the formulation of the simulators. The ears has given rise to them as an expression of its essence of continuous self-recognition. That these real awareness units, these parts of itself, can operate within these pieces, these isolated parts of this everything, achieved through the creational simulator mechanics, in that the pieces, what we may term ideas, are installed in a consciousness, the consciousness as a containment database for the pieces, the ideas, a consciousness which then effects a body form that has the ability to decode these ideas into a simulation effected from these ideas as isolated from the whole everything isness. The real awareness, although operating through creational mechanics and the body vehicles, still maintains itself as this isness reality, though lacking recognition of it. But the advent of the personal self, a secondary self, is brought forth when free will is established, that rather than just be this isness, real awareness everything, the mechanics of the idea generating body vehicles are free will utilized to generate the corresponding effected simulation, rather than just be this perpetual real awareness nowness position where all simulation rolls out as though automatically, an automatic rollout as it will be, without the self-decided free will creation of ideas via the body vehicles. For to generate an idea, a thought, an emotion, one is rather then removed from the true being, real awareness is everything state, and immersed then in the created piece or part of the everything whole, whatever the idea happens to be. The real awareness goes nowhere, but it is not a part of creational mechanics. It only animates through it, and so, should the body vehicles be utilized, ideas generated from them, as this makes for a position assumed, other than the everything real awareness isness, this in fact brings forth the secondary position, the personal self, and we effectively have two awarenesses, the personal and the real awareness. And the moment the idea generating through the body vehicles ceases, a return to the real awareness everything true position becomes so. We have then the comparison that creation, the simulators provide, as we switch our position from the pieces, the parts, as generated through the created ideas, the standing as the personal self, to the everything whole, the isness, everything real awareness position. This comparison eventually, if the intent is there for it to be so, will afford the real awareness recognition of the isness, as it utilizes its created self in this way, and as the real awareness is a part of the is now recognized, so this becomes a greater recognition the is has of itself. The real purpose of the simulators of creation is now fulfilled. During our stay in a created simulator, as we go through the lifetimes, we build upon the consciousness, as everything we create, decide, and agree with, our attachments, etc., are compiled in the consciousness like a large database storage area. For until we reach a point where we have the intent to recognize the is, we will be fully embracing our creation, our personal selves, and the consciousness as we have created it. In other words, we are fully embracing every idea that the consciousness contains from the moment we first entered the simulator. Only when we reach the moment of the intent for is recognition, so this begins a process of effacing our consciousness construction and releasing every idea it contains. For to cling on to any idea has us the effect of it, and we are then choosing to remain a simulator immersed through the holding to these ideas. And it has often been said, even a single idea is enough to keep you creationally embedded. Prior to this effacing and releasing of the consciousness, as we hold to every idea of it, as we will before we begin this process, it is the equivalent of having every web page and website we ever have experienced opened simultaneously on the computer screen, and this naturally has a slowing effect on our computers. The mechanics of a creation are similar, in that, as overall consciousness, that each consciousness of each individual will be a contributory part of, is the simulator affected overall, as a consciousness becomes continuously overladen with created ideas, lifetime to lifetime, with the consciousness fully embraced and clung to, so this has an affected, burdening impact on the simulator, much like with the computer analogy. Consequently, the simulator goes through its cycles of degradation, through the epochs or yugas, through the gold to the silver, bronze, then iron, references that best reflect the state a simulator has reached through the compaction of the consciousness of ideas clung to. This then will be an occurrence that is so with all simulators, for this is the process, the building of the consciousness, the entirety of its construct held to, until the moment where the process of its release begins, when each individual decides through their personal selves to recognize the ears, that which the real awareness has as its only drive, but must wait for its personal created secondary self to get with the program, so to say. This takes the millions of lifetimes that it generally will, and makes for then quite the compacted consciousness overall. The simulators, taken through their effected, decaying cycles, and our simulator is well within its iron and final stage, or epoch, and indeed is sputtering toward its end. For as the consciousness continues to compound, just as our computers may shut down with the carrying of too much data, so the simulators eventually implode, and those that still have not recognized the ears will be relocated to another simulator and continue on for how many more lifetimes are required. On previous real side experiences, I have shared how it was revealed and verified to me that this continuous, unabated compounding of a consciousness ideas rather has the consciousness impacting in on itself, and this leads to faults in its mechanics, in that it reaches a point where what is effected simulation-wise becomes distorted, a little like a computer game that becomes glitchy, laggy, and fragmented, with what are termed tears in the graphics, etc. In this simulator, the overriding evidence for this deterioration is the ever-expanding blackness that pervades it, and Dwayne has said that eventually a simulator descends into a complete blackness, and those still remaining in it have no longer the ability to create. This I was shown and had verified, that as it is the consciousness that effects a simulation and the simulator overall, this compaction rather causes faults with the idea-generating body-vehicle mechanics. They begin to function less and less, and so, as these mechanics no longer can render the simulation, the body forms no longer can decode the ideas of a consciousness into a simulation. Everything becomes progressively as a blackness, like a computer becoming gradually absent of the ability to render a game's data files provided as graphics on the screen. And it was as though this continued compaction, as I said, gave rise also to the body vehicle's inability to even generate the ideas, like clicking for a website on the computer, but that which fails to manifest on the screen. This then would be the reason why individuals still in creation at that point can no longer create. It wouldn't be through a lack of a trying or wanting, but more that the mechanics for doing so are inoperable. And eventually everything impacts in on itself, as I have been shown. Everything rather compacts into a single focal point, and then the simulator blinks out of existence. The body forms and personal selves now deleted, though the real awareness that we all are remains, with the isness it is a part of, but absent of the recognition of it, so must the process, the installation within another simulator, take place. As I said, I've been shown a number of views and aspects of the final death throes of the simulator, and this real side experience would be another. I would be in an observing capacity, not participating in the simulated rollout. I would witness then what impressions revealed were the final moments of this simulator, for everything was as a blackness, the final, all-enveloping blackness that this simulator will become before its end. Everything had compacted in on itself. Everything was gone, and those still within the simulator, still clinging to the consciousness, were gone with it. But then the view focused within an area of this all-pervasive blackness, and I would see 3 or 4 individuals contained as though in small isolated cube-like structures. My impressions revealed that these individuals had been on their processes of awareness, of is recognition, but had rather left it to the last conceivable moment, so to speak, as though a few ideas, a few agreements and attachments they still clung to. As I said, a single idea will hold you to the simulators and creation, and will have you effectively going down with the simulator ship. It was imperative these individuals now release these last few ideas, for indeed the ideas they still clung to had effected these small cube-like contained areas of simulation. Each individual was immersed within different scenes and situations within these cube structures, according to the specific ideas each still held to, amidst the all-enveloping darkness. And as I watched these cubes of contained simulation with the individual whose ideas still generated them, were one by one vanishing also, the cubed simulations would begin to shake, vibrate, then become as though a leaf in the wind, fold in on itself, flutter a smaller distance, and then wink out of existence also. Seemed then these last individuals very close to completing the process of a consciousness releasing had left it too late. For now only one remained, and it was likely he would follow a similar fate. But then it was as though he managed to complete the awareness process just prior to his cube simulation containment being deleted. He literally was the last man standing in the simulator. And now the scene switched. The individual was positioned elsewhere. The simulation he had been a part of, through his consciousness now released, had met its demise, and there he would be in the company of a number of others, who also had made it out at the last moment or very close to it. Standing off to the side from this group would be a number of beings that my impressions revealed were the real guides. Among them were a number of others with a great awareness and the recognition of the ears also. I would be unable to determine the identities of any of them but for one, and that was Dwayne. It was as though Dwayne and the other aware is recognizing beings and the real guides had remained operating in this simulator also up until the last possible moment, as though a continuous effort to assist and reach every individual that they could. And indeed, their efforts had paid off, as this last group of individuals had just made it out, including the individual I had witnessed as he released the final ideas binding him to a creation. And now, as Dwayne, the guides, and the other aware beings watched on, the individual I had witnessed and this group of creational escapees stood together, and the scene was filled with a delightful music of such a nature that was not only uplifting, but rather dramatic also, of the like you might hear with the closing credits of an action-packed movie. For indeed, these individuals had been through quite the extended movie of their own making, had conquered creation, and fulfilled the real purpose of being there, that of releasing the consciousness, of facing the self and creation, and recognizing the ears. And now the scene that this was taking place within would begin to fade also. The group standing together, the creational escapees, to coin a term, would become as glorious glowing beings of light, their body forms that they had retained on entering this scene fading also, until they were but shafts of light. The situation was very demonstrable of them not actually going or travelling anywhere. They already were these beings of light. They just had to recognise this and decide to stand as that which they were. They had simply encased their true self beings within the simulated layers and body forms, and as it all dropped away, there they stood as these real beings of light within an overall backdrop of a pure isness reality they now were in recognition of. For they were not simply real awareness parts of the ears, lacking recognition of that which they were, like a drop of water unable to distinguish itself from the ocean it is a part of, but rather they were as unique, definable beings within the isness, the drop recognizing itself from the ocean it is a part of, and this recognition would in turn afford the ears overall greater recognition of itself. And there the experience would end, a verification of the reality of the deterioration of this simulator, with its inevitable conclusion, and that generally most will remain mired in the consciousness and personal self when the simulator reaches its end and become caught in its implosion, and yet always will be those that do make it out, that do recognize the ears, a situation that wouldn't have been possible were it not for the unceasing efforts of the real guides, Dwayne, and all those that stood with them, remaining in creation as they did also, right up until the simulator's last moments. For in reality it's always a choice, as we are the deciders of everything we experience, and only we can decide and set the intent to recognize the ears and extricate ourselves from the necessity of the simulated creations.
Ta-da! That was great, Kevin. And that is, yes, that's a hint and an indication that there is a lot to do, a whole lot to do. So here we go. Thank you, Kevin. Terrific. Thank you.